without a fight, without a discussion. We have seen how the World Economic Forum, where the mega rich met and make decisions, has been presenting Xi Jinping as an example of the new capitalism. And conservatives they are in this economic forum. Classical conservatism was about reading Chesterton and Burke and okay, but that world was destroyed. Brussels, in the European Parliament. But they have left millions of people as losers in their social and cultural model. It is true that all good things are still valid. Family, nation, sovereignty, freedom, prosperity. Okay. And they are valid because they are permanent. In Spain, we say eternal values. But the new movements no longer want to preserve anything because there is very little to preserve. It's no longer a question of protecting the family, but of raising the enthusiasm in the young people for having good families, strong families, families with many children. It is no longer a question of defending local businesses against the big companies, because there are no longer any local businesses in our cities. We see that the streets are unsafe. Our daughters do not feel safe walking down the streets. Our streets no longer have the same colors and the same smells. Cities smell different in Europe. Low wages, insecure jobs, high taxes, and a massive influx of imported products. Elites will scare you with climate change, but giving to Islam and allow Sharia law to be imposed in some neighborhoods and in some cities in Europe. The situation, in my opinion, is so critical that we are no longer on the defensive. And conservatism has been on the defensive. We are on the reconquista. This is the main difference from what they call the new right-wing populism. We have no intention of reaching compromises with the elites. We have a commitment to the middle and workers' class, to those who suffer the consequences of the relocation of companies, of the massive importation of agricultural or industrial products, those who suffer the consequences of mass immigration or the totalitarian control in the social media. It's no longer, in my opinion, a question of conservation. It is a question of reconquering, of changing everything, from the rules of international trade to asylum regulation. We are closer to reaction. We are closer to counter-revolution than to conservatism. I think it is the future. The future belongs to those who understand the present, and the present has changed. And I think this is our challenge. I don't know if all the conservative people is saying, wow, but it's my personal opinion. Thank you very much to MCC, thank you very much, and I apologize another time for any mistakes I may make. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Jorge. Oh, hello. Someone said to me earlier, actually, the average age of the audience has plummeted this time because we have a delightful baby with us, and who's been remarkably well behaved. So a huge credit to both her parents who are here. So wonderful. Jorge, you apologized for your English, I think, at least twice, and you didn't need to apologize for it once. I have to apologise to anyone who came here looking forward to hearing David Engels, because the reality is you've got me instead. And we're very different characters with very different backgrounds. So anything that I say will be very different to what David would have said. But he sends his apologies. It gives me an opportunity to say a little bit about why we've organised this conference at MCC Brussels and why it's so important to us. Because just over a year ago, we were in this exact same room and we had a conference called Is Europe's Future Populist? And it was a very popular conference again. And the answer to that question, I think, was largely yes. Europe's future is populist. But it was a bit tentative, the answer. And it was identified very, very clearly that there was a lot of work to do, a lot of intellectual work, a lot of organisational work. And a year on, quite a lot has happened. We had the European parliamentary elections, where some good gains were made by populist parties, although perhaps not as exciting as some of us had hoped. We had very significantly, I think, and I think we were talking about this yesterday, we had the formation of the Patriots for Europe group, which has been a really strong and important force within the European Parliament and has sort of organised itself very quickly in making a big impact. We had obviously the election of Trump, and there's lots that we could talk about there. And more generally, the growth of European populist parties, particularly in France, Germany, and Austria. So a lot has happened, and we can see how rattled the European Commission, the elite across European nations that we keep talking about, how rattled they are by their increasing attempts to tighten the cordon sanitaire and to use judicial mechanisms to prevent certain people from standing in the elections. So the fight is on, and that's why we're here. MCC Brussels sees itself very much as part of that fight. And I think this session in particular is particularly important, and Jorge touched on some of those reasons. And I think because in reality, conservatives have been for quite a long time now part of the problem. Conservatives have closed their eyes to the seriousness of the situation. They've been more than complicit in what's gone wrong, and particularly at this moment in time, they completely failed to see the opportunity at stake. I think Frank and others spoke earlier about their optimism, and I think that's a really important point. I think most conservatives, particularly in the centre-right, do not have that optimism whatsoever, and that's something that I want to address. So in thinking about this session, I thought about, well, what have conservatives done for me, my family, my community, my nation, over the last 50 years? The short answer was, I considered this very carefully for quite a while, not a lot. So I want to say a little bit about why. So if I'm British, as I said before in the previous session, you can obviously tell, and I will speak very much to my experience and knowledge. So go back 50 years ago in the United Kingdom takes us to pretty much to this day, or maybe a few weeks afterwards, what was regarded at that time as the end of the miners' strike. Margaret Thatcher was Prime Minister, a political leader revered on the Conservative right. And it's often said at that moment, the right won the economic war and the left won the culture war. And I think we need to think about what a limited victory the right won at that point and how fundamentally important the culture war turned out to be and how these two things interrelate. So on the economic side, Thatcher's famous dictum was Tina. There is no alternative. There is no alternative to the market. And if you think about it, this perspective embodies a very fatalistic outlook where economic realities are seen as trumping all else and placing great restraint, massive guardrails around any political imagination. That moment is pivotal. At the same time, we had the clear defeat of the working class, the end of the left-wing politics as it was understood, it's been referenced earlier this morning, coupled with the conservative right, that didn't do much more than talk about market dynamics. It did not take on the culture war. And we had a vacuum, a political vacuum that was filled by two very, very important things. One is the technocratic management as a substitute for politics that we've talked about a lot. And the second is the cultural hegemony of post-material values, or more simplistically, therapeutic culture, if you like. And it was a short
The latter is too often used by the political left as a rhetorical tool to delegitimize those who challenge centralized power structures and entrench political elites. We are not opposed to politics in general. We are opposed to a system that from Brussels to Washington has turned its back on ordinary citizens, jeopardizing not only our cultural heritage and traditions, but also the very foundations of democratic governance. Consider, for instance, recent events in countries such as Romania and France, where the dissenting political figure have been systematically excluded from the democratic process through questionable means, raising serious concerns about electoral freedom. In recent years, movements frequently and inaccurately called populist have gained significant support across Europe and the United States. These movements have emerged in response to a political institutional order that has consistently ignored the voices of the people. This is not just a matter of left versus right. It's a broader confrontation between national communities and elite that has over time betrayed their interests. The current European Commission, led by Ursula von der Leyen, embodies this trend. A technocratic project that dreams of a hypothetical United States of Europe and seeks to centralize power even more aggressively in Brussels, often at the expense of national self-determination. Under von der Leyen leadership, the European Union has pursued policies that many perceive as antithetical to the traditions, values, and unique identities of its member states. These include a top-down approach to immigration policy and the imposition of environmental regulation under the Green Deal, which many argue have damaging effects of national economies. Rather than responding to the legitimate concern of citizens and businesses, the Commission and its allies seem increasingly disconnected from social and economic realities. In contrast, we advocate for a Europe of sovereign nations, an alliance based in a mutual respect for the distinct cultural, historical, and political identities to our members. We reject the idea of homogenized Europe ruled by a distant and often uncountable bureaucracy. Strong nations, we believe, are foundation of a strong Europe, not the other way around. In today's increasingly complex geopolitical landscape, marked by the ongoing conflict in Ukraine, which has destabilized an already fragile global order, the principle of national sovereignty is under unprecedented pressure. The European Union has adopted a position of near unconditional support for Ukraine, forcing member states to align their foreign policies accordingly. This approach, while politically convenient, risks undermining the autonomy of national governments and alienating domestic publics whose primary concerns are often economic and social. Instead of promoting peace and diplomacy, the EU has assumed the role of an active geopolitical actor, often without adequate public mandate. Turning to the United States, we observe parallel developments. The resurgence of sovereignism and conservative forces is challenging the dominance of political and corporate elites. Figures as President Donald Trump, of course, and Elon Musk have questioned the legitimacy of globalist paradigms and centralized authority. Similarly, Vice President Vance represent a compelling example of how conservatism and sovereignism can form a meaningful alliance against a system perceived to have abandoned working-class citizens. Musk, through his outspoken criticism of Silicon Valley and globalist ideology, and Vance, by giving voice to the American air trend, exemplify as a shared commitment to defending local identity and autonomy. I will also mention Steve Bannon, whose strategic insight led him to advocate for uniting diverse political forces in opposition to the globalist establishment. His call for transnational collaboration among sovereignism movement is one in the Lega party should heed. We must build coalition rooted not in elite consensus, but in popular legitimacy. This is a patriotic struggle, one that concerns the preservation of sovereignty, culture, and national identity in the face of a system that seeks to erase them through unchecked immigration and the promotion of ideologies foreign to our civilizational foundations. Our struggle is not only against political elites, but against a worldview that aims to dissimulate what makes our nation distinct: our tradition, our culture, and our right to self-determination. As Joseph de Maistre eloquently stated, the true liberty is not absolute liberty, but liberty within an order that defines us. The freedom we defend is one rooted in historical continuity, not one surrendered to arbitrary dictates of global order that disregards our identities. Drawing for the thought of Hermann Burke, we are reminded that political change must be organic and respectful of tradition. Radical upheaval, especially when detached from historical context, can be deeply destabilizing. We must instead strive for a balanced transformation, one that preserves what strengthens our communities while adapting thoughtfully to the challenge of our time. This is why we must move forward with conviction. The alliance between sovereignism and conservatism represent the most coherent path for defending the values that truly matter: the national sovereignty, cultural heritage, and the right of people to shape their own destinies. And this alliance is not merely aspirational. It's already taking shape. In Italy, Lega and Fratelli d'Italia govern together successfully with a common vision that is delivering tangible results. This partnership is not fleeting political convenience, but a long-term collaboration grounded in shared values and commitment to national interests. In conclusion, the struggle we face is not simply a political one. It's a struggle for the soul of our nations, for our identity, and for our freedom. Today we stand at a crossroad. Either surrender to a globalist vision that seeks to erase our roots, our histories, and our futures, or rise in defense of what makes us unique, free, and sovereign. It's upon this challenge that we must focus our efforts. Our objective is clear: to continue resisting the centralizing ambitions of the von der Leyen Commissions and to fight for a Europe of nations that respects the sovereignty of its people. If sovereignism and conservatism succeeded in finding, as I believe they can and must, the right balance between renewal and tradition, between passion and stability, then together we can finally overcome globalism and restore to our nation the right to determine our own future. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to thank MCC Brussels for the invitation to address you this afternoon. We touched on it this morning, and I hear a lot about this, about conservatives who are worried about being associated with populism, with the idea of a populist movement, that it's something they want to keep their distance from. As Frank talked about, a bad smell, that it's not something you feel comfortable with, and you're worried about being associated with anything called populism. I want to look at it from the other point of view, which is I am the editor of EuropeanConservative.com here in Brussels. And I fully embrace the populist movement, fully embrace the populist revolt as the best hope for humanity now. A revolt which has taken different forms in different countries, but at the heart of all of them, as Susanna said, is the demand for sovereignty and control from the people. The demand to put the demos, the people, back at the centre of democracy. Fully embrace the populist movement. From that perspective, I don't sit around worrying about whether conservatives should be associated with populism. I think, do I want to be associated with what conservatism means today? You know, do I want to be associated with those who call themselves conservatives? Not all of them, by any stretch of the imagination. Let's look at them. Tony talked about, in Britain, we have the experience of the Conservative Party, a party which has completely discredited the idea of being conservative for most British people in political terms. Frank Frady talked this morning about his experience in Kent of talking to people and how Tory voters are now Reform voters. I had a similar experience last summer when I was asked to go back and work on the communications, which is a polite word for propaganda, for Reform UK during the general election campaign. So I was working in the office for Nigel Farage, and at the end of it I thought, I want to go and see what's actually happening on the ground. So I went down to Clacton-on-Sea, where Nigel was the candidate, where he was eventually elected as a Member of Parliament. Clacton is a kind of classic English seaside town, rather run down, faded grandeur, very mixed, some nice middle-class areas, but also has a place called Jaywick Sands in it. Jaywick Sands is infamous as being, it's almost old white working class, and it's infamous as being sometimes it's called the most deprived area in Britain, and sometimes called one of the most deprived areas in Europe. So we went knocking door to door in Jaywick Sands. This is a seat that had a huge Tory majority, one of the biggest Tory majorities, Conservative majorities in the entire country. If I had said on the doorsteps of Jaywick Sands, I'm here as a Conservative, I would have been chased, literally, bodily chased out of the other people there. The hatred, the bitterness felt towards the Conservative Party had to be seen to be believed. On the other hand, when I told them I was there for Reform and Nigel Farage, they said, we've hired a minibus, taken our entire family down there to vote for Nigel tomorrow. Many of these people, either they'd voted Tory in the past, or many of them had never voted, apart from in the Brexit referendum, when they voted Leave. But they saw the Conservatives as the party that had betrayed Brexit, the party of mass immigration, the party that had degraded British society. And when I went back to the office, and Nigel said to me, what did you think? I said, it's going to be a landslide, Nigel. As indeed it was, one of the biggest turnarounds in majorities in British political history. So that's not a conservatism that we can be associated with. I read the papers in February of the German elections. Conservatives win German elections. I thought, what? Has the Alternative for Deutschland done even better than we expected? No, what they meant was the CDU had won. Even though it had won its second worst result ever, it was still going to be the largest party in forming the government. So, and in the name of conservatism, what does the CDU do? Immediately works towards forming a coalition, which they've now completed, I think, with the Social Democrats, and will continue the mass immigration Green Deal policies of the past, completely betraying the German voters and what they voted for. So this is not a conservatism that I want to be associated with, or an idea of conservatism. Here in Brussels, the European People's Party, van der Leyen and all of that, they are the enemy. These are the Brussels elites that we talk about, and they do it in the name of we're centre-right, we're conservatives. So that's a problem. On the other hand, do I want to be associated as a supporter of the populist cause with those conservatives that I meet many of them here in Brussels, kind of intellectual conservatives, kind of people who tell me, well, it really would be better if we could live in the past. I don't mean just bring back traditions, I mean actually live in the past. People who tell me, intelligent, educated conservatives, who tell me that they think the Enlightenment was a disaster for humanity. It was basically the kind of secular fall of man, and we're better off if it had never happened. And they hate it when I quote Spinoza or Machiavelli or someone like them. They think which is why I always make a point of quoting Spinoza and Machiavelli. I'll try and get them in later on. And who actually believe that was a bad thing, and who actually believe that Europe would be better if the Habsburgs still ruled Austria and Hungary, and if Britain still had an absolute monarchy that had the real power and not just the formal power to abolish Parliament. There are people who call themselves conservative intellectuals who actually believe and espouse this kind of nonsense. That's not a conservatism that I want to be associated with at all. So at the EuropeanConservative.com, our mission, as our website makes clear, is reclaiming and advancing the founding principles of European civilization and fighting for the future of a free and democratic Europe, with the emphasis on fighting and the future, not the past. And it's from that perspective that I think anybody who wants to take seriously reclaiming and advancing the traditions and the principles of European civilization needs to fully embrace the populist revolt. Too many conservatives have historically been very uncomfortable with democracy, with too much democracy, because they don't trust the masses. They share the left's kind of fear of the masses, the fear and loathing that the people can't be trusted, they can be manipulated and will come to the wrong decisions. Margaret Thatcher, who's already been mentioned, in many ways, people might talk about it as a kind of proto-populist these days, but Margaret Thatcher actually also distrusted democracy. She didn't like referendums. She said that referendums were the tool of dictators and despots. I actually love referendums, and we think we should have far more of them on the big issues facing the peoples of the nations of Europe today. The Conservatives have historically been very uncomfortable with too much democracy. There are principled and practical reasons both why anybody who wants to make conservatism real in Europe today has got to embrace democracy and the populist democratic revolt. Because the principles of national sovereignty and democracy, which always go hand in hand, have got to be at the bedrock of anything that we're trying to build. And because in practical terms, this is the only way we can win. I would like to tattoo that on the inside of the eyeballs of anybody who doubts the importance of democracy in Europe today. The other side have conquered all the institutions of European society, from the European Union downwards, through the universities, the courts, as we've seen, turned into political weapons to be used against democratically elected politicians in nations across Europe. The universities, the media, they have captured those institutions. And the only thing that we have in our grasp is democracy. That's what gives us the chance. Look what has Europe with the populist revolt. That's how it's shaken the Brussels establishment and made their cordon sanitaire almost impossible to maintain because people will not stand for it. Because a party like Chega in Portugal, which is brilliantly called Enough, that is the spirit of people, that we've had enough of that, we want something different. The changes that it's wrought. Look what's happened in America, where for all the attempts of the establishment and the courts to stop Donald Trump becoming president and implementing his policies, a genuine populist movement there, not just an old-fashioned Republican Party, but a genuine populist movement, won that election and has turned not only American but international politics on its head. It is possible to win and to bring real change about. We should recognise that our opponents, our enemies, the Brussels elites, they know what's at stake in this moment, and that's why they so fear the populist movement as a threat to their power. As I wrote an editorial recently, the spectre of populism is haunting the European Union, and that's very much the way that it's going. And they will do all in their power to keep their power. The two constituent parts of democracy from Athens onwards, demos, the people, and kratos, power or control. The aim of these people is to make sure those two elements remain as far away from each other as possible, and anything else in their power to do it. And we've seen that with the conviction of Marine Le Pen. We've seen that with the outrageous cancellation of the election in Romania, where the wrong candidate was going to win, so we'll just cancel the election. And we've seen similar forms of political warfare, and we haven't. They've only just started. This stuff is going to get more and more intense as they become more and more fearful of the populist revolt. So the stakes are very high. 2 years ago, when I first came to Brussels to start working with the European Conservative.com, I made the point in various speeches and articles that we need to recognise that this is a war. There was a secret kind of silent war against democracy being fought across the EU. I think we now see, with something like the Marine Le Pen decision, that that war is now out in the open. They are open, in the name of democracy, of course, they are openly fighting a war against democracy in the name of defeating populism and disinformation and all the other words that they use to justify their attacks. And I think we have to, anybody that wants change in Europe today, it is time to take a stand and take sides. To forget all of your doubts about, well, we don't like this party, we're not sure about that policy of any of the populist movements, because it's not about that. It's about the people of Europe rising and demanding their sovereignty, control, and their voice in society. And we should put aside all of our doubts and worries about individuals and support the populist revolt in whatever form it's taking in all the countries of Europe, because that is the future for us. And not be afraid of whatever names they might call us, far-right, populist, or anything else. Just want to finish with when Marine Le Pen was convicted, Viktor Orban, the Prime Minister of Hungary, I think had the very best response to it when he said, "Je suis Marine," capturing the spirit of the Charlie Hebdo protest for free speech. Je suis Marine, je suis democracy. That's what I think we should say in response to all of these attacks on individuals who are associated with the populist movement. Je suis Marine, je suis Victor, je suis Donald, je suis Georgia, je suis Nigel, or whoever's next in the firing line of the elite's war on democracy. And we should not waste this moment, because if we fully embrace the populist revolt, we can win now if we stand with the people that are uniting under the banner of the populism. And if we go on the offensive and ensure we stick to our principles, national sovereignty, democracy, and free speech, and make our slogan, "No surrender." Thank you.
Okay. If this is your first time, and I've spoken to many people, it's their first time at an MCC Brussels event, there's something that's very important as part of our tradition, and it is that we want to hear from you. We want to hear from you, the audience. We want to hear what you think. We want to hear your questions. We want to hear your opinions, and we welcome all opinions and all. So please, I'm going to invite you. The time to have the question or your comment is not when you're on the metro going home. It's now. So I'm going to encourage you to think of a question that you would like, to raise your hand, to wait for the microphone and to ask that question. But to get us started, I'd like to ask the panel to briefly, why does populism scare conservatives? Is it primarily an electoral concern? I'm going to lose my seat. Is it about substance? Is it that conservatives feel that it's the policies that they have I just disagree with? I want to be more green. I want to be more LGBTIQ friendly, or whatever it is. Or is it style? Is it a question of style that we don't act like that? We don't want to be associated with that. Or is it a combination of all three? Jorge?
I think we have to distinguish two ways of conservatism. There is a fake conservatism, for example, in the People's Party, the European People's Party, Partido Popular in España, CDU, and you know. And there is a real conservatism, for example, Fratelli d'Italia or PiS in Poland. And they confront us, or they confront the new populisms of different way. I think we can share objectives, targets with this real conservatism.
Okay, so
but not with the fake conservatism.
With the fake conservatives, why are they scared?
Oh, sorry?
With the fake conservatives,
yeah.
Why are they scared? What is it that scares them about populism?
The real. Because we are the people. We say what people say, and we are confronting them. We are saying their truth. We are on the offensive. For example, I have read now, Pedro Sánchez, the president, the socialist president of Spain, today has gone to Vietnam, and he has offered, I think, a wreath in the Ho Chi Minh Mausoleum. The fake conservatism, they wanted to make a deal with this man.
Yep.
And we say, no compromise with this man. And people say, okay, I want a person that confronts, really, because if not, we are dead. We are dead. We are big battle is maybe the last battle. If we lose, Europe is over.
Thank you.
This is the question.
Tony, would you like to pick up this question?
Yeah, please. I mean, I think on the fake conservatives, Jorge makes a really good point. They're complicit. I mean, that was my point in my talk. They are completely 100% complicit and have been since the end of the Second World War, as you said in your talk. So they've got a lot to lose here. They've got an enormous amount to lose. And maybe some of them are sort of hedging their bets and thinking about which way to turn, but largely they've got too much to lose. For me, though, the interesting question is the non-fake conservatives, because I don't remember power to the people being the rallying cry of conservatives. Power to the people is really, in a simplistic form, what we're talking about here when we're talking about populism. And I think I really agree with the way Mick put it in terms of our best chance of success. So in a way, history's moved on. And if you like, conservative ideals and really important values about autonomy, responsibility, family, community, nationhood, these really important values were given up, were traded or allowed to, or were not defended. And the world moved on. And now there's a reaction to it. And I think Frank really captured that very well this morning. There is a reaction to it, and it's taking a populist form. And the populist politicians, I love the phrase that Frank used, they've let the cat out the bag. And that gives people their voice. And that's kind of scary, I think, even for the non-fake conservatives, because there's an unpredictability about that. And I think that's something that needs to be talked about, faced up to.
Nice. Susanna?
What scares the fake conservatives? I think because they want to, first of all, conserve their chair, their seat. And this is what they scares they most. Because we are not selling our values in every case. We are not able to have alliance with the left, for example, in the European Parliament or in the national country for maintaining our seat. We defend the real values, for example, family. We don't sell the family on the new stream of the gender and the liquid LGBTQI issues. So I think we are more committed. More committed, yeah.
Nice. Mick?
Obviously, conservative discomfort with the idea of too much democracy is a very old idea. It goes back to Burke, and however far you want to go back, you'll find this kind of doubts raised about giving people too much power. I think what's different now is that the gap between the political class and the populace, the people, the demos, is even bigger than it was in the days of aristocratic power. I mean, they just occupy two different Europes altogether, and that terrifies them, the idea of the other Europe encroaching on power. So it's a real fear of the masses. And I think your point about is it just distasteful, John, is also actually true. They do think populism is very vulgar and coarse and rude. There's a famous video clip from Britain during the, it was kind of secret film taken during the Brexit campaign, which I was a great supporter, of course, where Dominic Cummings, who remembers him, he was kind of Boris Johnson's main plotter, and they then fell out, and that was part of the great crisis. Dominic Cummings was supposed to be a key Machiavellian, for want of a better word, figure in the Brexit campaign, and he's filmed saying, people saying, are we going to get our campaign in league with Farage and their campaigns? No, we'll basically let them appeal to the racist working class, and we're going to appeal to the nice, respectable middle class people who like the Union Jack. And there's definitely that kind of strain of it's an underlying fear of working class people who are out of their control, and it's very difficult for them to control, which is why they want to police what they're allowed to say on social media. Laden over with a kind of old, modern form of old-fashioned class snobbery and hatred.
Thank you. Let me see your hands. Great. I'm going to start with this lady here.
First, I want to all of you. It was all what you said was very interesting. In fact, I have a big question. A big question because we do agree on something. Whichever word you use, we are facing an European civilization crisis. And how do we answer to it? Because, yes, we have find also that we have a common enemy, which is the European Union and mostly the European Commission. And I would like to know what do you suggest, because it's fine for me to express all of your views, but how do we fight? Because the European elections are gone. In our countries, the elections are ignored. I'm Belgian, so they are, and I see it in France too. They are the governments are doing what they want.
Thank you.
So
perfect. Understood. I'm going to take this lady here.
Hi, I've got a couple of questions. Thank you for your remarks. First one would be to Jorge. Thanks. Populism is not conservatism, but why are the conservatists, either fake real, the only ones being accused of actually being populist? When, for example, we have in Spain, left-wing party Podemos in Spain, we had Irene Montero announcing purely populist subsidies for cheaper electric bills back in 2019. That, of course, never became real. She had not the power. Yet opposed the elites as the evil ones profiting from people's energetic poverty. And also to Tony Okmek, all of us present here, of course, support the defense of national sovereignty and believe that the globalist is harming somehow our economies, but hasn't it been a step a bit too far, especially bearing in mind the NHS crisis, the brain drain, or the bureaucratic nightmare that you're going through?
Thank you very much. This gentleman here.
Hello. Thank you very much for this conference. My question is very simple. Regarding what you say, I think that fake conservatism are really afraid of populism because populists prove that it's possible to persuade a true conservative agenda. So on that regard, my question is, how can we pass from opposition movements to build this agenda that has real impact on people? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, Jorge, do you want to take the first the questions there, particularly about Spain and populism?
The question is about the media. The media, it is brutal. I have said brutal because it's a brutal alliance between the media elites and financial elites and political elites. And this party is a communist 5.0. And they are I don't know, in English, it's a fake dissidence. They say we are dissident with the system, but they accept the mass migration, the gender ideology, and all the questions that we are facing us. But the media provoke in the people the feeling that these people is representing them. But for example, in Spain, the unique party that promotes a public referendum for constitution to submit to the people the policy about migration, the policy about security, policy about water, for example. It's Vox. They reject the referendum because they don't want to ask people what they need. And for the first woman, thank you very much. I think the question is, in my opinion, not to reach compromise with any enemy. As we can, why we can defend civilization? Okay, but it's not about words. Yeah, the words do not solve it. It's a concrete policy. It's concrete policies. It's not about how many migrants we can accept in Europe. No, we can accept zero.
So you're answering the question, how do we win? You're saying, don't compromise on your values.
Don't compromise.
I'd like to ask the rest of the panel, considering what happened in Romania and how lawfare is being used, it's not just enough to win an election anymore, you've got to win in court as well. How do people fight back? What would be your opinion about that?
Well, I think one thing that's very important is it's very disheartening, obviously. You see, I mean, I'm not a supporter of the particular candidate in Romania, but you see, there's a nationalist candidate's winning in Romania, people are getting very excited, they cancel the election. Marine Le Pen is the favourite and the clear leader in the opinion polls to become the next president of France, which, if it happened, would completely turn European politics and the EU on its head in a way that nothing other than Brexit has done. They do their best to make sure she won't even be allowed to stand. It's very disheartening. But I think it would be a big mistake to conclude from that. Therefore, that means they're too strong and we can't beat them. Because these are not things that they would choose to do. They are acting out of fear and terror. Using the law in this way to bludgeon democracy is not a good look for the European establishment. It's not something they want to advertise themselves for. It demonstrates their weakness. It demonstrates how terrified they are of the rising populist revolt. And I think we have to keep going. We have to fight harder.
Thanks. Anyone else want to make a comment?
Just one comment I'd make, I think, is really going back to what Susanna was talking about earlier, which is the need to stand together and work together across nations. And we're in this interesting situation where you've got to fight for democracy, fight for what we need within our own nations, but at the same time work together and stand side by side. And I think for me that's one of the things that's actually quite tricky to get your head around, because too often you hear about the EU bureaucracy and the EU technocrats and this, that and the other. And actually it can become a really easy excuse for people not having the fight in their own country, not winning people over in their own country. But at the same time, people are in this together and need to call things out.
Thank you. Susanna?
In last plenary in Strasbourg, there was a debate about the mayor of Istanbul arrested by the Erdogan regime, because arresting the opposition is proper of the authoritarian regime. But let's see what's happening in Europe and also in America. For example, Latin America, Bolsonaro. They tried with Trump, but they didn't succeed.
Yep. Thank you.
They tried and succeeded with the Romanian. They tried and they are succeeding with France, Marine Le Pen. But in plenary in Strasbourg, they talk about Istanbul and Erdogan. That's right. I agree. He's a dictator, and the arrest is the mayor opponent. But it's happening also in Europe. And we have to raise up our voices, because it's an evident attack to democracy.
Thank you very much. A great point. Please stand up. Yeah.
Thank you, everyone. This has been very thought-provoking. I would like to add a comment to the question that you asked earlier of why are conservatives so afraid of populism? And I'd like to offer an alternative perspective of where that fear might be coming from. This is not necessarily my own position, but I'd like to hear your responses to these objections. I think that the true fear could be coming because people believe that power, when you give the power to the people, that can be based on their fleeting and base whims and wishes. That can be just based on temporary gratification that's here today, gone tomorrow. And it can lead to an unreasonable fervor. And when we're basing things on things like Machiavelli's realpolitik, it's based on this will to power where the end justifies, and moral absolutes can be thrown out the window when it's all about winning. And so then it becomes based on fear-based, because we're so afraid of these issues of immigration and all these things, where populism is not a robust political theory in and of itself. It's just a reaction based on fear. And then when that fear comes, which Machiavelli was all about getting people to fear so that you can keep power, then the fear is that this leads to a dictatorship. So I would love to hear your responses to some of those fears.
Lovely question. Thank you very much. This lady here.
You mentioned it, given the current EU and von der Leyen's Commission call for militarization against Russia, what will be the populist and nationalist point of view? Will we call for a referendum to hear people's voices? Is there a threat that the weapons will be used for national defense?
Okay, thank you. This gentleman over here. Put your hand up, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to the panel. Alexandre de Perlinghi for Réseau Voltaire. 2 weeks ago, Le Figaro published the data from IFOP survey, where 40% of the French population see the triggering of a civil war likely. How do you connect this with the populist revolt mentioned by Mr. Hume earlier on?
Thank you very much. Okay, would anyone on the panel like to pick up on any of those particular points?
On the first question, which I thought was extremely good, but it takes me back to the Brexit referendum. And you talk about what can be unleashed Well, what was unleashed in Britain in the Brexit referendum was an incredible debate. So we hear about these fleeting whims and the stupidity of people, etc. And that was what was said when David Cameron hug a husky. The one thing he did do was make the mistake of giving the British people a referendum. And they took that opportunity. So everyone was afraid of, what people will do with this opportunity. And would they be clever enough or smart enough to understand all the complexities? What happened across the country were debates within families, debates across workplaces. There were massive, massive debates. And there was enormous Project Fear launched at people to try and persuade them not to vote for Brexit. And by a small margin, but nonetheless, the biggest turnout ever in British history, the Brexit was voted for. It was a remarkable experience. Now, that doesn't guarantee anything. I think Frank made this point this morning about you can't guarantee anything. But to me, that tells you that actually when people do have a voice, that they take it seriously and they rise to the challenge.
Okay. Mick.
Yeah, that idea of the, I agree with Tony about that idea of the voters being too fickle or stupid or God knows what they'll do. It kind of is the outlook of the entire... Actually, that's the foundation. That's what the European Union is based on, is the idea that you can't actually trust people to run their own affairs, so we better have a kind of supra-national body and a commission to do it for them. But I will actually disagree with your interpretation of what Machiavelli says, that I mentioned in my speech, because my favourite thing that Machiavelli wrote is actually called "The multitude is wiser and more constant than a prince." I recommend it to all of you. It's a very interesting Enlightenment text. And that is a view not shared, 500-year-old view not shared by almost any political leader today, that the multitude is wiser than a prince. Although they don't talk about princes, they talk about experts and commissioners and so on. And it took J.D. Vance to come to Europe, to Munich, and lecture them in Machiavellian terms about Europe's leaders, about the fact that you can do nothing without the support of your people, and that we must recognise that every citizen has a voice and wisdom. And I think that's an important foundation we should bring back to European politics.
Susanna Jorge, anything to add?
A question, very difficult question was posed before, how we can switch from the opposition to the government. It's a very difficult question, of course. But when I started involved in politics, in my region, my party had the 0.9%. And people ask me, are you mad? Not. Maybe I was visionary.
Disappointed.
Visionary, because 2019 took the 34%. And in Tuscany, it was the most left-wing region in Italy, but we won many, many towns and cities. And so maybe we have to be coherent with our values, always. Even if the other people think, are you mad, are you not politically correct, are you in the opposite side, don't care, and go on with our values.
Marvelous. Jorge?
About the question of the rearmament plan and the war, and I think there is not populist answer to this question, because every party, every country has his own necessities and our needs. But it is true that it is a proposal that face directly our political position, because there are bureaucrats that have decided the challenge, the process, the money, and all and this is the question we have to vote, we have to discuss, and overall we have to decide thinking in the national interest, in the national security interest.
Hands up, please. Okay. Just trying to... Bruno?
I think we shouldn't be too sanguine about lawfare, particularly, but the use of state power At the end of the day, the state is a coercive body. That's ultimately where its authority lies. I don't think we should be too sanguine about that. I think there is the danger of a real attempt to redefine politics, to redefine politics along authoritarian lines. There are strong constituencies in European countries, particularly among the young, for a strong leader. Not the leadership of democratic debate, not the leadership that comes through fighting a contest for ideas, but particularly a shield. There are a lot of young people in Germany who are very worried about FT. We saw it with the rise of the Linke vote, for example. I think it's unwise to be too sanguine about the use of authoritarian, coercive state power to shortcut the democratic debate, and very, very important, I thought Susanna was very good, to stand up for the concept and the idea of leadership through democratic struggle and the practices, the cultural practices of freedom.
Now, I can see you, the person in the audience who hasn't asked a question yet, who really wants to ask a question, and you're going to be mad when you go home. So ask your question now, okay? We want to start with Thomas over here.
Yeah, Thomas Robin, European Conservative. Question to any one of you who want to answer. Would it be helpful to sort of adopt one common terminology for ourselves? What I mean is that even in this panel seems to be split. Some of you say that if they're the conservatives, they're not. They're centrists, they have become left-wing, whatever. The other side says they're conservative, they're not, they're populists, because we don't want to conserve, we want to push forward. We're not on the defensive, we're offensive, right? So which is it? Should we adopt one thing for the sake of unity?
Thank you very much. This lady here. Stand up, please.
For this interesting debate. I wrote down what I was going to say because I feel like we all have such different opinions, and I was going to say a million different things. So let me read the question or the comments. So you keep talking about the will of the people, but what about the people that don't agree with you? And this is going back to what you said, Susanna, about Tuscany. Are all of them considered to be part of the corrupt elite? Surely they can't all be put into one category. Populism, I believe, is that it offers simple solutions to a reality that is very far from simple. They offer a simplistic way of categorizing the nation and its people. You say right populists, left populists, good conservatives, fake conservatives, and so on, right and left. So I think society thrives thanks to the difference of opinions, and as much as I hate saying this word nowadays, diversity. There needs to be a different solution than populism, or maybe we need to reform the essential meaning of it. I'm sorry, I'm shaking because I'm not a good public speaker. And at the end, I believe that populism, in my opinion, is more like what's happening in America. It's a primitive way of governing, one where I believe that in Europe, with our historical heritage, we should rise above. That's not a populism I want to be associated with. So we should thrive for that.
Fabulous, thank you very much. I'm going to go to the panel. Who would like to take whatever aspect of it?
Okay, well, I'll go first then, since everyone else is thinking. I think that last question is a real tough one. But I guess, what about the people who don't agree with you? Well, what about the situation we have at the moment where some people are ruled out of court? They're simply ruled out of court. Okay, that you're not allowed, so you're not allowed to vote for them. Or if you do vote for them, that vote's not allowed to count for anything. That's a really serious situation. And there's the question of how we got here, which I think we've been talking about, over the course of the session. So if that's the current situation, that you're not allowed to vote or your vote isn't counted in certain cases, it's the wrong idea, then surely that's more scary. That's more scary. And I think what you're pointing to, when you say it's primitive, I mean, partly a question of taste that Mick was talking about earlier. It's all very vulgar. But it's this fear of, what you're talking about could lead to authoritarian, essentially fascism, yeah? That's where this could all head. It's out of control. Yet it is the populists that are saying, we will respect the vote and the voice of all people, regardless of whether we agree with them or not. Now, you might raise your eyebrows and smile at the ceiling and shake your head a little bit, which is fair enough. There are no guarantees. It comes back to the question from Bayer about how do we fight this. It's down to us to fight. It's down to everyone to fight. It's down to us to persuade people to fight, etc.
Thank you,
I want to roll. Sorry, I'll shut up.
Anyone else? Jorge, do you want to address some of that?
If I have understood, okay, the question is why we are not united to other groups. No? In Spain, for example, we formed 6 regional governments 2 years ago. And we had a coalition program.
Yeah.
And 1 year ago, we had to break the government because in one question, the migration, the fake conservatists, they preferred with Socialist Party because of the asylum and migration pact imposed by Brussels. And this is the question. Then it's not relevant left and right. Now the balance is very different, and it's not possible. I insist to not compromise our not value, because values is a word very unuseful. No, the concrete policies. I want to do this because people want we do this.
Well, if people vote for you, your job is to carry out the agenda of the voters, and that doesn't mean that you don't respect people who lost, but the fact is they didn't win, right?
Yeah.
Mick.
Yeah, just in response to my colleague Tamash's question about shouldn't we just couldn't we find something to call ourselves that we could all be united around? I think it's very important in politics that we judge people by what they do, not what they say about themselves or what they call themselves. I offer as an example of that the European People's Party, which is the biggest party in the European Parliament and is the most anti the peoples of Europe of any party in that Parliament in terms of its elitist, centralising tendencies. I think we have to establish the principles that we want to fight for, and then unite all forces that will stand with us on those principles and see where we get with that. We cannot begin the other way around by saying, let's find some way that we can all, some middle ground that we can all kind of meet on. We've got to stand by our principles and fight for them. And that brings me back to a previous question about defence, which I think also I was really struck with something that J.D. Vance said in Munich at the security conference when he made the point to Europe's leaders, you're all here talking about defence all the time, we hear that. Our question is, what is it you want to defend? What is it that Europe's leaders are actually defending now? He called them the enemy within, basically, people who've betrayed Europe's values. How can, in other words, as we've discussed, how can political leaders that have spent years trashing the idea of national sovereignty suddenly turn into the defenders of national sovereignty in Ukraine, or they can't defend their own borders and won't defend their own borders? How can they pose as the defenders of national sovereignty in Ukraine or anywhere else? These are the important questions that have to be asked about the political basis on which we're going to stand and fight. And I think that's got to come before anything else.
Thanks. Yes, Frank?
Yeah, on the question of primitiveness. Yeah. Right? Well, let me tell you this, okay? In the European Union, the ruling elites are not primitive because they can decide over a dinner table what's going to happen, right? Decisions are taken by the courts, by the judges that have never been elected. Financial decisions are taken by the banks. So in Italy, the financial markets can more or less dictate what the economic policy is going to be about. Decisions are taken by the World Bank and the IMF, by experts of all sorts. All the policies that the EU puts forward come about through non-elected NGOs who make those proposals So it's very sophisticated. It's the very opposite of being very primitive. On the other hand, when you have real struggles in public life between real people, blood and sweat becomes part and parcel of that. And you might want to call that primitive, but that is the stuff from which democracy is really made. And when people say that populism is primitive, or look at these people, how unsophisticated they are, what they are really saying is that we think that unless you're part of the expert class, unless you have a PhD in psychodynamics and are a psychotherapist, you are not counted for very, very much. And I think that there is a real paternalistic impulse in what you were saying or implying, because you assume that at the end of the day, politics should be carried out over the dinner table, where people smile at each other and carve out what's going to happen. And you know, there's nothing more primitive, ignoring the votes of millions of people in Europe by putting a cordon sanitaire around it. There's nothing more primitive than basically telling the judges, could you please make sure that this particular person doesn't run for an office, or is not allowed to do that? It seems to me that this is the really primitive politics. And when Susanna talked about Turkey, we can see exactly how primitive that authoritarianism is, because it's Turkey after all.
Thanks, Frank.
But when it happens in France, it's very sophisticated.
Okay, thank you. Give the gentleman over here, please. Okay.
Hello to everyone. I'm glad that you mentioned war, because war is already here. It's not yet a military war, but it's a social, a cultural, and a religious war. For example, every time you go to vote to a community municipality and there is none black Asian people, I think that is a clear indication it's a war. Or every time we see non-European flags in the European continent, there is a clear indication we're in a hidden war. My question for you is, how do we create new structures, new tools for citizens to fight back this, to recover European sovereignty? Because otherwise, if we don't change this now, we will lose all
okay.
European values.
Thank you very much. Okay, I'm going to ask the panel to address any of those remarks in the last round, and also to give your sort of conclusion at the end, if you have any final thoughts at the end of the panel, because you have about a minute to do that.
We have to win the elections. This is the platform to win the vote of our citizens, and to win elections and change the European Council, okay, and take the decisions. This is the platform. Win elections, convince people, be strong, be determined. This is the way.
So for me, I'd just like to refer back to something said this morning, and I actually put it really, really well. She said about the experiment that had been conducted on ordinary people by the undermining of the nation state by the elite. That experiment had been conducted on us. But now there's an experiment for us to engage in on our terms, and that's what populism is. It's an opportunity for us to fight back for what we believe in, for what we want. It will be messy. There won't be agreement. It's not. It's our opportunity, and that opportunity has come about, and it won't hang around forever. And so I guess it's been really encouraging for me to see so many people in the room engaged with this debate, this discussion, the curiosity, the interest, and the passion. And at the end of the day, I guess the only thing I'm going to say, John, is to plug MCC Brussels. That's what we're here for, to push this fight. And we really believe I get in trouble for saying so, but we're up for the fight. Follow us on social media. Come to our events. We want to do a lot more stuff also with bright young minds. We want to develop ideas. We want to develop the intellectual base.
Your minute's up, Tony.
For all of this. So join us.
Thanks. Susanna.
I think to Darwin, the evolution, and only the stronger can actions be. Because we are facing some different cultures, and for example, Europe is facing the Islamization. The Islamic culture is a very strong culture. Mm-hmm. And if we are weak, if we are not brave, if we are not convinced of our values, we will lose our battle, our struggle. So I think in this global war, we have to be very, very brave.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Nick.
Following on from that, I'd just like to say one thing in conclusion, that everybody who supports democracy, whatever they call themselves, one thing we can and should unite around is supporting Israel. For democracy, for civilization against barbarism, we should take a stand against Islamism in Europe, and we should look to Israel as an example of what democracy in action means. A nation state that is politically divided but united in its determination of its citizenship to stand up and defend its national sovereignty and borders. And I think it's an example we should all learn from.
Thank you very much. Would you panel a round of applause, please? Thank you. So, listen. We're going to have a coffee break. And for those on the live stream, you can take a break as well. And I'm going to invite us all back at 4 o'clock because we have at 4 o'clock at 1600, we have a really interesting panel about power and about how it's taken, which is a very good follow-on from the conversation. See you shortly.